The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, crystal shards catching the light like broken promises. Maya Reeves stood frozen in the doorway of the penthouse suite, her wedding dress still pristine white, watching her fiancé's naked form tangled with her maid of honor on Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Maya. David's voice cracked as he scrambled to cover himself. This isn't what it looks like. She almost laughed. Almost. Because what else could you do when your entire life imploded in high definition, when the man you'd trusted with your heart, your body, your carefully guarded virginity just 3 hours ago, was already seeking comfort in someone else's arms? The wedding guests are still downstairs, Maya heard herself say, her voice strangely calm. They're waiting for us to come back from freshening up. Serena, her best friend since college, her chosen sister, the woman who'd held her hair, back during food poisoning and helped her pick out this very dress, sat up slowly. Her lipstick was smeared, her hair wild. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Maya, you don't understand. You've been so distant lately, so cold. David needed... What I needed, Maya interrupted, still standing in that doorway like she was suspended between two different lives, was to not find my husband fucking my best friend on our wedding night. The words hung in the air like smoke. David flinched. Good. We can work through this, he said, standing now, reaching for his pants. Maya, please. The company merger depends on this marriage. Your father's business is not my responsibility anymore. Maya turned and walked away, just like that. No screaming. No tears. No dramatic confrontation. She simply left, her heels clicking against marble. Past the wedding gift still wrapped in silver paper. Past the champagne tower that had cost $3,000. Past the life she'd thought she wanted. She made it to her car before the shaking started. Her phone buzzed. David. Then Serena. Then her father. Then David again. She turned it off and drove into the night, still wearing her wedding dress, still tasting the champagne that had turned bitter in her mouth. Maya drove until she reached the bridge overlooking the city, pulled over, and finally allowed herself to feel the magnitude of what had just happened. Not just the betrayal, though that cut deep enough to steal her breath, but the realization that she'd been performing her entire life, playing the role of the perfect daughter, the perfect fiancée, the perfect virgin bride who'd saved herself for a man who couldn't even wait 3 hours to break his vows. She'd given David everything she had to give, and he'd thrown it away before their marriage was old enough to buy alcohol. The tears came then, hot and furious and silent. By dawn, Maya Reeves had made a decision that would change everything. 3 months later, Maya stood in the rain outside a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, her dark hair plastered to her skull, water dripping from her chin onto the employment application in her hands. The ink was running. Perfect metaphor, she thought grimly. She'd burned everything. Sold her car, donated her clothes, closed her bank accounts, started over with a new last name, Patterson, her mother's maiden name, and a fabricated work history. The wedding dress money had lasted exactly 6 weeks. Pride, it turned out, was expensive. The coffee shop was called Grind, and it looked like every other hipster establishment in the Pacific Northwest. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, baristas with arm tattoos and attitude problems. Maya had applied to 17 places in the past week. Grind was number 18. She pushed through the door, water pooling at her feet on the reclaimed hardwood floors. "We're closed," called a voice from behind the counter without looking up. "I'm here about the job." The woman, early 20s, septum, piercing, the kind of effortless cool Maya had never possessed, glanced up with barely concealed irritation. "What job?" Maya held up the soggy application. "Barista position. The posting said, 'Posting's been up for 3 months. We're not really hiring.'" Of course they weren't. Maya felt something inside her chest tighten, the same feeling she'd had standing in that penthouse doorway. The feeling of doors closing, of options disappearing, of being utterly alone in a world that didn't care if she sank or swam. But she'd learned something about herself in the past 3 months. She didn't sink easily. Then why haven't you taken it down? The barista, her name tag read Zoe, looked up with more interest now. Excuse me? The posting. If you're not hiring, why leave it up? Seems like poor business practice. Maya stepped closer to the counter, leaving wet footprints. Unless you are hiring, but you're being selective, which I understand. Good help is hard to find. Zoe set down her cloth and really looked at Maya for the first time. Took in the thrift store jeans, the canvas sneakers with holes, the determination in her eyes that no amount of rain could wash away. You ever worked coffee before? No. Food service? No. Customer service? No. Maya lifted her chin. But I'm smart. I learn fast. And I need this job more than anyone else you're going to interview. Something shifted in Zoe's expression. Maybe it was recognition. One woman who'd hit rock bottom recognizing another. Or maybe it was simply the brutal honesty in Maya's voice. Fine. Trial shift tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't be late. Maya nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the door. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've survived Marcus. Marcus? Zoe's smile was sharp as a blade. The owner. Maya arrived at Grind at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, wearing the only clean clothes she had left, black jeans and a white button-down that had seen better days. The shop was still dark, but she could see movement inside. She knocked. The man who answered the door was not what she'd expected. Tall, yes, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it repeatedly, but it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Gray-blue, like storm clouds, and absolutely unforgiving. You're early, he said without preamble. Better than late. He stepped aside to let her in, and Maya caught a whiff of his cologne. Something expensive and understated. Everything about him screamed money, from his perfectly fitted jeans to his watch that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. What was a billionaire doing running a coffee shop in Portland? I'm Marcus, he said, not offering his hand. And you're Maya Patterson, according to your application. Something in his voice made her spine straighten. That's right. Interesting resume. Lots of gaps. Maya had been expecting this. I took time off to care for a sick family member. It wasn't entirely a lie. She'd been caring for herself, and her trust issues definitely qualified as sick. Marcus moved behind the espresso machine with the kind of fluid efficiency that came from practice. He'd done this before. Many times. Show me, he said simply. Show. You what? How you make coffee? Maya stared at the machine like it was a foreign object, which essentially it was. I know. That's why I said show me, not make perfect coffee. His fingers moved over the controls with casual expertise. Learning curve starts now. For the next hour, Marcus put Maya through what could only be described as coffee boot camp. Grinding beans, steaming milk, pulling shots. Her first 3 attempts were undrinkable. Her 4th was merely terrible. Again, Marcus said each time, his voice neither kind nor cruel, simply expectant. Maya's hands were shaking by the 5th attempt. From caffeine, exhaustion, or nerves, she couldn't tell. The milk steamer hissed like an angry snake, and she jerked back, sloshing scalding liquid across her wrist. Shit, she hissed, then immediately flushed. Sorry, let me see. Before she could protest, Marcus had taken her wrist in his hands. His touch was surprisingly gentle, clinical almost, as he examined the red mark blooming across her skin. It's not bad, he said, but he was already moving toward the small first aid kit behind the counter. But burns can get worse before they get better. Maya stood very still as he cleaned the burn and applied a small bandage. His hands were warm, steady, and she found herself staring at the way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he concentrated. "There," he said, stepping back. "Try again." "The coffee?" "The coffee." This time, something clicked. Maybe it was the steady way he'd tended her burn, or maybe it was simply muscle memory finally kicking in. But Maya pulled a shot that was actually drinkable. Marcus tasted it without expression, then nodded once. Not terrible. Coming from him, it felt like high praise. So do I get the job? Marcus studied her for a long moment. Maya had the strange feeling he was seeing more than she wanted to show. The careful way she held herself, the wariness in her eyes, the proud tilt of her chin that said she'd rather starve than beg. 6:30 tomorrow morning, he said finally. Don't be late. Maya lasted exactly 3 days before Marcus made her want to throw hot coffee in his face. It wasn't that he was cruel. Cruel would have been easier to handle. It was that he was maddeningly, relentlessly competent, and he expected the same from everyone around him. When she made mistakes, and she made plenty, he didn't yell or lose his patience. He simply corrected her with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything else. Milk temperature is critical, he said on day 3, watching her struggle with the steamer again. Too hot and you kill the sweetness. Too cold and it won't hold its structure. I'm trying, Maya snapped, frustration bleeding into her voice. Some of us weren't born knowing how to work a $15,000 espresso machine. Something flickered in his expression. No. Some of us learned because we had to. The weight in his voice made Maya look up sharply. For just a moment, his carefully constructed mask slipped, and she saw something raw underneath. Pain, maybe. Or loss. Then it was gone, and he was back to being Marcus, the untouchable coffee perfectionist. Again, he said simply. Maya wanted to quit. The thought occurred to her roughly 17 times per shift, but something kept her coming back. And it wasn't just the money, though. She desperately needed that too. It was the way Marcus moved through the world like he belonged in it. Like he'd never had to second-guess himself. Never had to wonder if he was enough. Never had to rebuild himself from nothing after everything fell apart. Maya wanted that certainty. That unshakable sense of self. Even if she had to earn it one terrible latte at a time. By the end of her first week, she'd stopped burning the milk. By the end of her second, she could pull a decent shot of espresso. And by the end of her third, she'd started to notice things about Marcus that probably weren't appropriate for an employee to notice about her boss. Like the way he always arrived before dawn and stayed long after closing. Like how he knew every regular customer's order by heart, but never seemed to have friends of his own. Like the expensive watch he wore but never checked. As if time was something that happened to other people. He's a mystery, Zoe said one afternoon during the brief lull between lunch and the evening rush. Been here 2 years, never talks about his life outside this place. Some of us think he's running from something. Maya understood running from something. What kind of something? Zoe shrugged. Money problems, maybe. Family drama, secret wife. She grinned. Secret husband. Maya found herself hoping it wasn't the secret husband option, which was problematic for approximately 17 different reasons. The revelation that she was attracted to Marcus had hit her like a freight train the previous Tuesday, when he'd reached around her to adjust the grinder settings, and she'd caught a whiff of his cologne mixed with coffee, and something uniquely him. Her body had responded with an intensity that shocked her. A low, warm pull in her belly that she hadn't felt since her wedding night. Before everything went to hell. Which was exactly why she couldn't afford to feel it now. Maya had learned the hard way that wanting someone was dangerous. It made you vulnerable. Made you trust when you should be suspicious. Made you believe in futures that crumbled at the first sign of trouble. Better to stay numb. Better to stay safe. But Marcus made staying numb surprisingly difficult. The coffee shop door chimed, and Maya looked up from the latte she was finishing, to see a man in an expensive suit scanning the room with predatory interest. Everything about him screamed corporate shark, from his perfectly styled hair to his shoes that probably cost more than Maya made in a month. "Can I help you?" she asked, though something in his manner made her want to step backward. "Looking for Marcus Stone," he said, and Maya noticed he didn't say please or thank you or any of the basic courtesies that separated humans from wild animals. "I'm sorry, there's no one here by that name." The man smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Marcus Stone, 6'2", dark hair, thinks he can hide in coffee shops forever." His gaze swept over Maya dismissively. "Tell him Richard Blackwood is here to discuss his return to civilization." Maya felt the air in the room change, like the pressure drop before a storm. She turned to see Marcus emerging from the back office, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked rattled. "Richard," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. "What brings you to Portland?" "You know exactly what brings me to Portland." Richard Blackwood's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "The Pemberton deal is falling apart without you. The board is getting restless. Your father is—" "My father is dead," Marcus interrupted, and Maya felt the words hit the air like a physical blow. "Your stepfather, then. He's concerned about the company, about you." Richard's gaze flicked around the coffee shop like he was cataloging every detail for future mockery. "This little sabbatical of yours has gone on long enough." Maya realized. She was holding her breath. Marcus, who she'd known as the quietly competent owner of a neighborhood coffee shop, was clearly something else entirely. Someone else entirely. "I need a minute," Marcus said to Maya without looking at her. "Take your break." It wasn't a request. Maya grabbed her jacket and headed for the back door, but she didn't go far, just far enough to be out of sight while still being able to hear every word of the conversation that followed. 2 years, Marcus. 2 years of this, whatever this is. The grief counselor said 6 months, maximum. The grief counselor wasn't there when Emma died. Emma. Maya's chest tightened. A wife? Girlfriend? Sister? "Neither were you, technically," Richard said, and Maya heard Marcus's sharp intake of breath. "You were in Tokyo, closing the Yamamoto deal, which, I might add, made the company $30 million. While my daughter died in a hospital room, alone." "Daughter?" Maya pressed her back against the brick wall, feeling like she'd been punched in the stomach. Marcus had lost a child. She wasn't alone. She had nurses, doctors. She had strangers. Marcus's voice was raw now, stripped of its usual careful control. "She died asking for me, and I was 5,000 miles away, worried about profit margins." The silence that followed was deafening. "You can't bring her back by playing barista, Marcus. And you can't honor her memory by destroying everything you built." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm choosing something different." "This isn't choosing. This is hiding." Another silence. Then Maya heard footsteps, and Richard Blackwood's voice, closer to the door now. "Think about it, but don't think too long. The company won't wait forever, and neither will I." The front door chimed as he left, and Maya counted to 30 before slipping back inside. Marcus was standing behind the espresso machine, but he wasn't making coffee. He was just standing there, staring at nothing, looking like a man who'd been hollowed out from the inside. "Marcus?" Maya said softly. He looked up, and for a moment she saw everything he'd been hiding. The grief, the guilt, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been running from himself for 2 years and was finally too tired to keep moving. "I'm sorry you heard that," he said. "I'm sorry you lived it." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Like he'd expected judgment or pity, and Maya had offered neither. "Her name was Emma," he said quietly. "She was 7 years old, and she loved butterflies and chocolate ice cream and terrible pop music." His voice cracked slightly. "She had leukemia. The doctors said she was responding well to treatment, that I had time to finish the deal in Tokyo. But she took a turn while I was gone. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. How long ago? 2 years, 3 months, 16 days. He said it like he'd been counting every single one. The day she died, I walked out of the boardroom of Stone Industries and never went back. Stone Industries. Maya's breath caught. Even she knew that name, one of the largest financial consulting firms in the world, worth billions. Marcus Stone wasn't just rich. He was generationally, obscenely, changed the world with a phone call. Rich, and he was making coffee in Portland, Oregon, wearing jeans with holes in the knees. Why here? Maya asked. Why this? Marcus looked around the coffee shop like he was seeing it for the first time. Because here, I'm not the CEO who missed his daughter's death for a business deal. I'm not the father who failed the only person who mattered. I'm just Marcus, the guy who makes decent coffee and knows how to fix the temperamental espresso machine. Maya understood that need to disappear, to become someone new, someone who hadn't made the mistakes that haunted you in the dark. But you can't run forever, she said gently, echoing Richard's words. Marcus looked at her sharply. Is that what you think I'm doing? Running? I think, Maya said carefully, that we're both pretty good at it. For a long moment, they just looked at each other across the coffee shop, two people who'd lost everything and ended up in the same place, trying to figure out how to be human again. Then Marcus smiled, a real smile, not the careful mask he usually wore, and Maya felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. We should probably get back to work, he said. Probably. But neither of them moved, and Maya realized they'd crossed some invisible line. They weren't just boss and employee anymore. They were two broken people, recognizing each other's damage, and that was either the best thing that could happen or the worst. Maya started staying later. It wasn't official. Marcus never asked her to. But somehow she found herself wiping down tables and organizing inventory long after Zoe and the other staff had gone home. It gave her something to do, besides go back to her studio apartment and stare at the ceiling, thinking about wedding dresses and broken promises, and the way her life had imploded in the space of a heartbeat. It also gave her time with Marcus when his guard was down. Tonight, she was restocking the pastry case while he balanced the till, both of them moving in the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over the past few weeks. The shop felt different after hours. Softer somehow. More intimate. Like a secret they were, keeping from the rest of the world. Can I ask you something? Maya said, not looking up from the croissants she was arranging. Shoot. Why don't you hire a manager? Someone to run this place so you don't have to work 16-hour days? Marcus paused in his counting. Who says I work 16-hour days? Maya gave him a look. Your car is always here when I arrive, and it's always here when I leave. Either you live in the supply closet, or you have a serious commitment to caffeine. Retail. He laughed, and the sound sent warmth spiraling through Maya's chest. She'd been trying to make him laugh for weeks now, dropping little comments and observations, and every time she succeeded felt like a small victory. I tried hiring a manager, Marcus said. 3 of them, actually. They all quit within a month. Why? Apparently I'm micromanaging and controlling and have impossible standards. He made air quotes with his fingers. Their words, not mine, Maya snorted. Shocking. You? Controlling? I prefer detail-oriented. Right. And I prefer temporarily, displaced to basically homeless. The words slipped out before Maya could stop them, and she immediately regretted the confession. She'd been so careful not to reveal too much about her situation, not to let anyone see how precarious her existence had become. Marcus looked up from the cash register. Are you okay? Financially, I mean? I'm fine, Maya said quickly. I'm between places right now. It was technically true. She was between her old life and whatever came next, between the woman she'd been and whoever she was becoming. Where are you staying? a place downtown. Also technically true, if you considered the studio apartment she could barely afford downtown, instead of the sketchy part of town where sirens were a nightly lullaby. Marcus studied her for a moment, and Maya had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through her careful evasions. "The apartment above the shop is empty," he said finally. "If you're interested." Maya's hand stilled on the pastry case. "What?" "It's not much. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, barely any closet space. But it's furnished, and the rent would be reasonable." He paused. Very reasonable. Maya's first instinct was to say no. She'd learned the hard way that accepting help from men, especially wealthy, attractive men who made her pulse quicken, was dangerous. It led to expectations, obligations, a slow erosion of independence until you woke up one day and realized you'd traded your autonomy for security. But her second instinct was to say yes, because she was tired of lying awake at night listening to her upstairs neighbor's domestic disputes and wondering if the guy who dealt drugs from the stoop would ever decide to expand his business into home invasion. "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "Why offer? You barely know me." Marcus closed the till and leaned against the counter, really looking at her. "I know you show up 15 minutes early every day and stay 2 hours late without being asked. I know you haven't missed a shift in 4 weeks, even when you came in with a fever that had you swaying on your feet. I know you're running from something, and you're too proud to ask for help even when you need it." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "And I know what it's like to feel like you don't have anywhere safe to land." Maya felt. Tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Tears were weakness, and weakness was luxury she couldn't afford. "I can't pay much," she said, which wasn't exactly acceptance, but wasn't exactly refusal either, like I said. Very reasonable. They looked at each other across the empty coffee shop, and Maya realized they were negotiating more than just rent. They were negotiating trust, the kind of tentative, fragile trust that grew between two people who'd both learned the hard way that the world could be cruel and unpredictable and utterly unforgiving. "Okay," Maya said finally. "Okay?" "Okay, I'll look at it." Marcus smiled, one of his real smiles, the ones that transformed his entire face. And Maya felt something inside her chest crack open just a little bit, which scared her more than staying in her current apartment ever could. The apartment was perfect, which was exactly the problem. Maya stood in the middle of the small living room, taking in the exposed brick walls, the hardwood floors, the kitchen with actual granite countertops and appliances that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread instead of a rental unit above a coffee shop. "It's too nice," she said. Marcus, who was leaning against the doorframe watching her reaction, raised an eyebrow. "Too nice? I can't afford this. Even if you're charging me next to nothing, this place is worth at least $1,500 a month, probably more." "It's been empty for 2 years," Marcus said. "I'd rather have someone living in it who'll take care of it than let it sit vacant." Maya walked to the window that overlooked the street, noting the way the afternoon light filtered through the gauzy curtains and made everything look soft and golden. Like a place where good things happened. Like a home. She'd forgotten what home felt like. "Why has it been empty for 2 years?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for so long that Maya turned around to look at him. His expression had gone distant, the same way it did whenever someone mentioned his past life or his family or anything that existed before this coffee shop. "Emma designed it," he said finally. She was obsessed with those home renovation shows, always talking about open concept and accent walls and whether we should go with subway tile or natural stone in the bathroom. His voice got softer. She picked out everything. The paint colors, the fixtures, the furniture. She said it was going to be her apartment when she got older, her practice space before she got her own place. Maya felt her heart clench. A 7-year-old girl, fighting cancer, dreaming of the future she'd never get to have. "Marcus," she started, but he shook his head. She never got to see it finished. She died 3 weeks before the renovation was complete. He looked around the apartment like he was seeing it through his daughter's eyes. I couldn't bring myself to change anything, but I couldn't bring myself to use it either. So it's just been waiting. Maya understood waiting. She'd been doing a lot of it herself lately. Waiting for her heart to heal. Waiting for the nightmares to stop. Waiting to feel like herself again instead of this hollow, guarded version of who she used to be. Maybe it's time to stop waiting, she said gently. Marcus looked at her with something like surprise. Maybe it is. They stood there in Emma's dream apartment. Two broken people trying to figure out how to live in a world that had taken everything they'd thought they could count on the rent, Maya said finally, because she needed to know the practical details before she could let herself want this. What would you actually charge me? What are you paying now? Maya hesitated. $450. Marcus nodded. $450 it is. Marcus, that's ridiculous. This place is worth exactly what someone is willing to pay for it. And right now, that someone is you. Maya stared at him. Why are you doing this? Because, Marcus said, and there was something raw and honest in his voice. I think we could both use a little kindness right now. Kindness. Such a simple word, but Maya realized she'd been starving for it. David had never been kind. Charming, yes, and generous when it served his purposes, but never truly kind. He'd been incapable of the sort of quiet, undemanding generosity that Marcus was offering now. I'll need first month's rent, Maya said, which was as close to yes as she could manage. Of course. And I'll sign whatever lease you want me to sign. We'll figure out the paperwork later. Maya nodded and walked through the apartment one more time, imagining herself making coffee in the beautiful kitchen, reading on the comfortable sofa, sleeping in the bedroom with its soft gray walls and enormous windows, imagining herself healing in a space that had been designed with love, even if that love had been cut short. I'll move in this weekend, she said. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely happy. Not just content or satisfied, but happy in the way that lit up his entire face and made Maya remember why she'd once believed in fairy tales. Welcome home, Maya. Home. The word settled into Maya's chest like a seed, small and fragile but full of possibility. Maybe this was what starting over really looked like. Maya moved into the apartment with 2 suitcases and a stubborn determination, not to cry at the thoughtfulness Marcus had put into every detail. There were groceries in the refrigerator, not fancy, expensive things, but basics like bread and eggs and the kind of coffee she preferred for her morning cup. There were towels, in the bathroom closet and extra blankets on the bedroom shelf. There was even a small bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen counter, with a note that simply said, "Welcome." It was more consideration than anyone had shown her in months, and it scared her almost as much as it touched her. Maya had learned not to trust kindness. In her experience, it always came with strings attached, conditions that weren't revealed until you were already tangled up and unable to escape without losing pieces of yourself. But Marcus didn't seem to want anything from her, except her continued presence in the coffee shop, and even that felt more like companionship than employment. She was still unpacking when she heard footsteps on the stairs outside her door. Maya tensed. She'd been jumpy since the wedding, hyper-aware of sounds and movements and anything that might signal someone getting too close. Maya. Marcus's voice, muffled by the door. I brought dinner. Maya opened the door to find him standing in the hallway with 2 paper bags that smelled like heaven. Thai food, he explained. From the place down the street. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got a variety. You didn't have to. I know, Marcus said simply. I wanted to. Another kindness. Maya was starting to recognize the pattern, and it made her nervous. They sat on the living room floor. Maya didn't have a dining table yet, and shared pad thai and green curry and spring rolls while the sun set, outside the large windows. It felt strangely domestic, like something couples did instead of boss and employee. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. using his chopsticks with the kind of practiced ease that suggested extensive travel or expensive dining habits. Shoot! What were you running from? When you came to Portland, I mean. Maya had been expecting this question for weeks, but it still made her chest tighten. She'd gotten good at deflection over the past few months, at giving just enough truth to satisfy curiosity without revealing the whole humiliating story. A wedding, she said finally. Marcus looked up from his curry. Your own? My own. What happened? Maya set down her chopsticks and leaned back against the sofa. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant sounds of traffic and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Safe sounds. Normal sounds. I found my fiancé with my maid of honor 3 hours after our ceremony, she said, the words coming out flat and matter-of-fact. Turns out he'd been cheating on me for months, maybe longer. I was just too naive to see it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. It gets better, Maya continued, because once she'd started talking, she found she couldn't stop. The marriage was supposed to merge our family businesses. My father had been planning it since I was in college. When I left David at the altar, so to speak, it destroyed the deal and cost my family about $20 million. Jesus. My father hasn't spoken to me since. Neither has anyone else from my old life. Turns out when you're the disappointing daughter who ruins the family fortune, people stop returning your calls pretty quickly. Maya reached for her water glass and was surprised to find her hand wasn't shaking. Maybe time really did heal all wounds, or at least make them hurt less, acutely. So I ran, she finished. Changed my name, emptied my savings account, and started over. Marcus was looking at her with something like admiration. That took courage. That took desperation, Maya corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Maya considered this. Courage is choosing to do something difficult because it's right. Desperation is doing something difficult because all your other options are worse. And which one brought you here? Maya looked around the apartment, at the wildflowers on the counter, the soft blanket draped over the sofa, the way the evening light made everything look golden and peaceful. I'm still figuring that out, she said honestly. Marcus nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. For what it's worth, I'm glad you ended up here, wherever the motivation came from. Even though I'm a terrible barista. You're getting better. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. Marcus smiled, and Maya felt that dangerous warmth in her chest again. Give it time. Time, such a simple concept. But Maya realized she hadn't been thinking in terms of time lately. She'd been thinking in terms of survival, of getting through each day without falling apart completely. But sitting here with Marcus, sharing Thai food and honest conversation, she found herself wondering about the future for the first time in months. What would happen if she stayed in Portland? If she kept working at the coffee shop, kept living in this beautiful apartment, kept having these quiet, intimate dinners with a man who was starting to matter more than was probably wise? Maya, Marcus said, and she realized she'd been lost in thought. Sorry, just processing. Take all the time you need. Another kindness. Maya was definitely starting to see the pattern, and despite all her hard-won cynicism, she was beginning to trust it. 3 weeks into living above the coffee shop, Maya's carefully constructed walls began to crack. It started small. Marcus bringing her soup when she mentioned feeling under the weather. Maya staying late to help him prep for a catering order, their hands brushing as they reached for the same supplies. Quiet conversations during the slow afternoon hours when the shop was empty except for the distant hum of the espresso machine and the soft jazz Marcus played through the sound system. Maya told herself it was just friendship, mutual understanding, between two people who'd both lost everything and were trying to rebuild. Nothing more complicated than that. She told herself this, right up until the night she woke up screaming. The nightmare was always the same. She was back in that penthouse suite, walking through the door in her wedding dress, but this time David and Serena weren't alone. Her father was there, shaking his head in disgust. Her mother, looking away like she couldn't bear the sight of her daughter's humiliation. A crowd of wedding guests, all of them pointing and whispering about Maya's failure to keep her husband satisfied, her failure to be enough. In the dream, she tried to run, but the wedding dress was too heavy, the train too long. She stumbled and fell, and when she looked up, everyone was laughing. Maya jerked awake in her beautiful bedroom, heart hammering, sheets soaked with sweat. It took her a moment to remember where she was. Portland, not Los Angeles. Emma's apartment, not her childhood bedroom. Safe, not trapped. But the panic was still there, clawing at her throat, making it impossible to breathe. Maya stumbled to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass, trying to ground herself in the present moment. Streetlights. The familiar outline of the buildings across the street. Real things. Safe things. A soft knock at her door made her freeze. Maya? Marcus's voice, concerned. Are you okay? I heard... Maya closed her eyes. Of course he'd heard. His apartment was directly below hers, and the old building wasn't exactly soundproof. I'm fine, she called, but her voice came out shaky and thin. Can I come in? Every instinct Maya had developed over the past few months screamed at her to say no, to keep the door locked, keep her vulnerability hidden, maintain the careful distance she'd worked so hard to create. But the panic was still there, making her hands shake and her chest tight. And suddenly, the thought of being alone with it felt unbearable. It's unlocked, she said. Marcus appeared in her doorway wearing jeans and a t-shirt, hair mussed like he'd been sleeping. He took in her appearance, the sweat-damp hair, the haunted look in her eyes, the way she was hugging herself, like she was trying to hold her pieces together, and his expression softened. Nightmare? He asked gently. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Want to talk about it? She shook her head. Okay. Marcus moved into the room slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt if he moved too fast. Can I make you some tea? Or we could just sit for a while if you want. The simple offer, no demands, no expectations, just presence, nearly broke Maya's composure entirely. You don't have to, she managed. I'm sorry I woke you up. You didn't wake me up. I was already awake. Marcus settled into the armchair, by the window, careful to maintain distance while still being close enough to offer comfort. I don't sleep well these days. Because of Emma? Because of a lot of things. His voice was quiet in the darkness. Grief has a way of rewiring your brain. Makes it hard to trust that good things will last. Maya understood that completely. How do you get through it? One day at a time. Sometimes 1 hour at a time. Marcus looked at her with gentle understanding. The nightmares get better eventually. They don't go away completely, but they lose some of their power over you. How long? For me? About a year before I could sleep through the night consistently. But everyone's different. Maya sank down onto the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted. The panic attack had drained her, left her feeling hollowed out and fragile. I used to be stronger, she said quietly. Before everything fell apart, I thought. I could handle anything. I was naive, but I was resilient. You're still resilient, Marcus said firmly. You picked yourself up after your world imploded and started over in a new city with nothing but determination. That's not weakness, Maya. That's incredible strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It never does, from the inside. They sat, in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of shared understanding settling between them like a blanket. Maya found her breathing slowly returning to normal, the tight feeling in her chest beginning to ease. Marcus, she said finally. Yeah? Thank you. For not making this weird, I mean. For not making me feel like I'm broken. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been tenderness. We're all broken in some way. The trick is finding people who fit with your particular kind of damage. Maya felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening that she'd kept locked for months. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unexpected. "Stay?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop it. Marcus went very still. "Maya, not like that," she said quickly, heat flooding her cheeks. I don't want to be alone right now. You could take the chair, or I have extra pillows for the floor, or..." "Okay," Marcus said simply. "Okay, I'll stay." Relief washed over Maya so intensely it was almost dizzying. "Thank you." Marcus settled back into the armchair, pulling the throw blanket from the back over his legs. "Try to get some sleep. I'll be right here." Maya curled up in her bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, and for the first time in months, she felt truly safe. Not because Marcus was protecting her. She didn't need protection, had learned to protect herself, but because she wasn't facing the darkness alone. As she drifted back to sleep, Maya's last coherent thought was that this was dangerous territory, letting Marcus see her vulnerability, depending on his kindness, starting to trust that he might actually be who he seemed to be. But for once, dangerous felt like a risk worth taking. Maya woke to the smell of coffee and something that might have been pancakes. She sat up slowly, taking in the morning light streaming through her windows, and the fact that Marcus was no longer in the chair by the window. Had she dreamed the whole thing? Then she heard the sounds from her kitchen, soft clattering, the quiet hiss of something cooking, and realized he was making breakfast. Maya padded barefoot to the kitchen to find Marcus standing at her stove, fully dressed, flipping what were definitely pancakes in a pan she was pretty sure she didn't own. "Morning," he said, without turning around. "Coffee's ready if you want. Some." Maya poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter, studying Marcus's profile in the morning light. He looked tired but content, like making breakfast for near strangers was something he did regularly. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I wanted to." Marcus glanced at her over his shoulder. "How are you feeling?" "Better." It was true. The nightmare felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. Embarrassed, maybe. Don't be. We all have our demons. Marcus plated the pancakes, perfectly golden, exactly the right thickness, and set them on her small dining table along with butter, syrup, and fresh strawberries that definitely hadn't been in her refrigerator the night before. "Did you go shopping this morning?" Maya asked. "Quick run to the market down the street." Marcus settled into the chair across from her. "I thought you might be hungry when you woke up." Another kindness. Maya was starting to lose count. They ate in comfortable silence, and Maya found herself watching the way Marcus cut his pancakes into precise squares, the way he listened to the sounds of the city waking up outside her windows, the way he seemed completely at ease in her space. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. "Sure." "Do you miss it? Your old life, I mean." Marcus considered this while he chewed. "Parts of it. I miss the feeling of building something, of solving complex problems. I miss the adrenaline of closing a big deal." He paused. "But I don't miss the person I was when I was living it." "What kind of person were you?" "Ruthless. Single-minded. I told myself I was providing for Emma, building something for her future, but really I was just addicted to winning." Marcus's voice went quiet. "I scheduled my daughter's life around board meetings. I missed school plays for conference calls. I was so busy building an empire that I forgot to actually live in the world I was creating." Maya recognized the self-recrimination in his voice. "You were doing what you thought was right. Intention doesn't change impact." Marcus met her eyes. "Emma needed her father, and I gave her a bank account instead. She knew you loved her." "Did she?" "I hope so, but I'll never know for sure." Marcus pushed his pancakes around his plate. "That's the thing about death. It makes everything permanent. No do-overs, no second chances to get it right." Maya reached across the table without thinking and covered his hand with hers. Marcus went still at the contact, but he didn't pull away. She knew, Maya said firmly. Children always know when they're loved, even when the adults in their lives are imperfect. Trust me on this. Marcus turned his hand palm up under hers, his fingers curling slightly around her wrist. The touch was warm and careful, and absolutely electric. How can you be so sure? He asked. Because you're here. Because you walked away from everything that mattered to you professionally. Because you realized what actually mattered was her. Because you've spent 2 years punishing yourself for not being the father you wish you'd been. Maya's voice softened. That's not the behavior of someone who didn't love deeply. Marcus stared at their joined hands for a long moment. You're very wise for someone who claims to be running on desperation instead of courage. Maybe they're not as different as I thought. Maybe not. They sat there in the morning light, hands connected across Maya's small dining table, and something fundamental shifted between them. The careful distance they'd been maintaining began to dissolve, replaced by something warmer and more dangerous. Maya knew she should pull her hand away, should reinforce the boundaries that kept her safe. But Marcus's skin was warm against hers, and for the first time in months, she felt less alone in the world. The moment was broken by the sound of Maya's phone buzzing on the counter. She reluctantly let go of Marcus's hand and went to check the display. Unknown number, but the area code was familiar. Los Angeles, Maya's chest tightened. I should take this. Marcus nodded and started clearing the breakfast dishes, giving her privacy. Hello? Maya said, stepping into her bedroom. Maya. The voice was clipped, professional, familiar in the worst way. It's David. Maya sank onto her bed, all the morning's peace evaporating in an instant. How did you get this number? I hired someone to find you. We need to talk. No, we don't. Maya, please, just hear me out. Against her better judgment, Maya found herself listening. The merger is back on, David continued. My father and yours worked out the details, but there's a condition. Maya's blood ran cold. What condition? We have to be married, officially. The contracts were written with our marriage as a prerequisite, and they can't be changed without starting the whole negotiation over. Then start over. Maya, this is a $50 million deal. Do you have any idea what that means for both our families? Maya did know. $50 million was the difference between her father maintaining his company and losing everything he'd built over 30 years. I don't care, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I know you're angry, David continued. You have every right to be. What happened on our wedding night? That was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake that I regret every day. A mistake that lasted months, apparently. It meant nothing, Maya. Serena meant nothing. You have to believe that. Maya closed her eyes. 3 months ago, she would have given anything to hear David say those words. Now they just made her feel tired. What exactly are you asking me to do, David? Come back. Marry me properly this time. We'll make it work. And if I say no? Silence. Then, your father's company goes under within 6 months. My family loses the house, the business, everything. 50 jobs disappear overnight. Maya felt the weight of expectations settling back on her shoulders like a familiar coat. The good daughter, the dutiful daughter, the daughter who sacrificed her own happiness for the greater good. I need time to think, she said. Don't take too long. The deadline for the merger is in 2 weeks. The line went dead, and Maya sat staring at her phone, feeling like she was standing in that penthouse doorway all over again, watching her life implode in slow motion. A soft knock made her look up. Marcus stood in her bedroom doorway, concern written across his face. Everything okay? He asked. Maya looked at him, at his kind eyes and his rumpled hair, and the way he was looking at her like she mattered, and realized that no, everything was very much not okay, because somewhere over the past few weeks, she'd started to imagine a different kind of future. One that included morning coffee and late-night conversations, and the possibility of healing with someone who understood what it meant to rebuild yourself from nothing. but the past had just caught up with her, and it wanted her back. "Maya?" Marcus said again. "I might have to leave Portland," she said quietly. Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Surprise, disappointment, something that might have been hurt. "Why?" Maya looked at her phone, then at Marcus, then at the apartment that had started to feel like home for the first time in months, because some mistakes are too expensive to walk away from twice. Maya didn't tell Marcus about David's ultimatum right away. She told herself she needed time to process, to figure out what she was going to do before involving anyone else in her mess. But really, she was terrified of seeing disappointment in his eyes. Or worse, relief. For 3 days, she went through the motions of normal life. She made coffee, served customers, bantered with Zoe, and pretended her world wasn't slowly tilting off its axis again. Marcus noticed something was wrong, of course. He was too observant not to pick up on her distraction, the way she kept checking her phone, the careful distance she'd started putting between them again. "You're pulling away," he said on Thursday evening as they were closing the shop together. Maya looked up from the register she was counting. "What?" "You're pulling away from me. From this." Marcus gestured around the coffee shop. "Whatever that phone call was about, it spooked you." Maya had always been a terrible liar, and months of emotional exhaustion hadn't improved her skills. "It's complicated. Most important things are." Maya finished counting the till and locked the register. "My ex-fiancé wants me to come back, to Los Angeles. To get back together? To get married, actually. For real this time." Maya couldn't look at Marcus while she said it. "Apparently our family's business merger depends on it." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When Maya finally looked at him, his expression was carefully neutral. "What did you tell him?" "That I needed time to think." "And what are you thinking?" Maya sank into one of the cafe chairs, suddenly exhausted. "That 50 people will lose their jobs if I don't go back. That my father will lose everything he's worked for his entire life. That maybe personal happiness is a luxury I can't afford." Marcus pulled out the chair across from her and sat down heavily. "And what does your gut tell you?" "That marrying David would be like willingly walking into a prison cell." "Then don't. Do it." Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one responsible for other people's livelihoods." "Aren't I?" Marcus's voice was sharp. "You think I don't feel responsible for the employees at Stone Industries? For the clients who trusted me with their investments? For the shareholders who believed in my vision?" "That's different." "How is it different?" Maya struggled for an answer. "Because you had a choice. You could walk away because you had enough money to start over. I don't have that luxury." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You think this is about money? Isn't it?" "Maya, do you have any idea how much this coffee shop loses every month?" Maya blinked. "What?" "Grind operates at a significant loss. Has since the day I opened it. The rent on this building alone costs more than we bring in on our best month." "Then why?" "Because I needed something to do with my hands while I figured out how to be human again. Because I needed to prove to myself that I could build something without destroying the people I cared about in the process." Marcus's voice was quiet but intense. "Because sometimes the most expensive choice is actually the only one you can afford to make." Maya stared at him. "You're subsidizing the entire operation." "I'm investing in my own sanity. That's not the same thing as what I'm facing." "Isn't it?" Marcus leaned forward. "You're telling me you have to sacrifice your happiness for other people's financial security. But what if there's another way? What if the problem isn't that you're being selfish, but that the system is designed to make you feel responsible for other people's failures?" Maya felt a flicker of something that might have been anger. "My father built his company from nothing. He's not a failure." "I didn't say he was. But his business problems aren't your responsibility to solve through marriage. Tell that to the 50 people who work for him." "Maya." Marcus's voice was gentle now. Those 50 people deserve to work for a company that's financially stable, without requiring the owner's daughter to marry against her will. If the business can't survive without this merger, then maybe it shouldn't survive. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. How can you say that? Because I've seen what happens when you sacrifice everything for a company. It doesn't make you noble. It makes you a martyr. Marcus's eyes were steady on hers. And martyrs don't get to have lives. They just get to have causes. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. So what am I supposed to do? Just let my family lose everything? You're supposed to stop taking responsibility for other people's choices and start taking responsibility for your own. Maya stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. You don't understand. You've never had to choose between your own happiness and other people's survival. Haven't I? Marcus stood too, his voice rising slightly. You think leaving Stone Industries was easy? You think I didn't know that my decision would affect thousands of people? That clients would lose money, and employees would lose jobs, and the ripple effects would touch lives I'd never even know about? Then why did you do it? Because I realized that trying to save everyone else was killing me, and a dead man can't help anyone. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. That's different. You were grieving. You weren't thinking clearly. I was thinking more clearly than I had in years. Marcus stepped closer, his eyes intense. Maya, what happened on your wedding night was devastating. But it was also a gift. A gift? Maya's voice rose. Finding my husband with another woman was a gift? Finding out who he really was before you spent the rest of your life with him was a gift. Discovering that your father values business deals more than your happiness was a gift. Learning that you're strong enough to walk away from everything and start over. That was a gift too. Maya felt anger flare in her chest, hot and clean and liberating. Don't you dare tell me what I should be grateful for. I'm not telling you to be grateful. I'm telling you to stop letting other people's poor choices dictate your life. And I'm telling you that some of us don't have the luxury of walking away from our responsibilities. Responsibilities? Marcus's voice was incredulous. Maya, your only responsibility is to yourself, to the life you want to build, to the person you want to become. Everything else is just other people's expectations. That's easy for you to say. You're rich. And you're free. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Maya stared at him, breathing hard. Free? I'm about to lose my job, my apartment, probably my entire new life. And you think I'm free? You're free to choose, Marcus said quietly. Whatever you decide, to go back to David, to stay here, to go somewhere entirely new, it's your choice. That's freedom, Maya. And it's worth more than any business merger. Maya felt tears spill over, the first ones she'd allowed herself since that night on the bridge months ago. What if I choose wrong? Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. What if you choose right? Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something that made her heart stutter. Not pity, not obligation, not the careful kindness she'd grown accustomed to. Want. Pure, uncomplicated want. Marcus wanted her to stay. The realization hit her like lightning, electric and terrifying and absolutely undeniable. Maya, Marcus said softly, and she could hear everything he wasn't saying in the way he spoke her name. I should go, she said, stepping backward. I need to think. Marcus nodded, but his eyes never left her face. Whatever you decide, I want you to know. These past few months, getting to know you, having you here, it's been the best part of my day. Every day. Maya's breath caught. Marcus, I'm not saying it to influence your decision, he said quickly. I'm saying it because you should know. You should know that you matter, that someone would miss you if you left, that you're not just responsible for other people's happiness. You're responsible for your own too. Maya stood there in the empty coffee shop, looking at a man who'd somehow become essential to her daily existence without her realizing it, and felt the weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. Stay and build something new with Marcus, while 50 people lost their jobs because she was too selfish to save them, or go back to David and a life that would slowly drain the color from her world, one compromise at a time. "I have to call David back tomorrow," she said finally. Marcus nodded. "I know." Maya turned and headed for the stairs that led to her apartment, then paused at the door. "Marcus? Yeah?" If things were different, if I didn't have all this baggage, all these obligations. "Things aren't different," Marcus said gently. "But you are. You're not the same woman who walked into that penthouse 6 months ago. You're stronger now, smarter, more yourself." Maya felt fresh tears threaten. "What? If myself isn't enough?" Marcus smiled, and it was the saddest, most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Maya Patterson, you are more than enough. You're everything." Maya climbed the stairs to her apartment with those words echoing in her head and the taste of impossible, choices bitter in her mouth. She had less than 24 hours to decide between the life she'd built and the life she owed. Either way, someone was going to get hurt. The only question was whether it would be her. Maya didn't sleep. She spent the night pacing her apartment, making lists of pros and cons that didn't add up to anything resembling clarity. Every time she convinced herself that going back to David was the right thing to do, she remembered the way he'd looked at Serena on their wedding night. Every time she decided to stay in Portland, she thought about her father's employees, people with families and mortgages and children to feed. By dawn, Maya had worn a path in Emma's beautiful hardwood floors and was no closer to a decision. She was making her third cup of coffee when her phone rang. "Dad," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Maya." Her father's voice was strained. "David tells me he spoke with you." "He did." "And?" Maya closed her eyes. "And I'm thinking about it." "What's to think about? This merger could save both our companies." "At the cost of my happiness." "Happiness." Her father made the word sound frivolous. "Maya, this is bigger than your feelings. This is about legacy, about responsibility, about you refusing to admit that your business model is failing." Maya interrupted, surprised herself with her boldness. Silence on the other end of the line. "I beg your pardon? Dad, if your company can't survive without forcing your daughter into an unwanted marriage, maybe the problem isn't the market. Maybe the problem is management." "Maya Elizabeth Reeves, I will not be spoken to like what? Like someone who made a series of poor business decisions and is now expecting his daughter to bail him out." Maya's voice was getting stronger, more certain. "Dad, I love you, but I won't sacrifice my life to fix your mistakes." Another silence. Then, "If you don't come back, don't bother calling this number again." The line went dead. Maya stared at her phone, feeling like she'd just stepped off a cliff. Her father, the man who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped with her homework and walked her down the aisle to a future that had imploded in her hands, had just disowned her. For the second time in 6 months, Maya should have felt devastated. Should have been sobbing or panicking or calling him back to apologize. Instead, she felt lighter, like she'd been holding her breath for 28 years and could finally exhale. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Maya?" Marcus's voice, concerned. "I heard shouting. Are you okay?" Maya opened the door to find him standing in the hallway with a cup of coffee and a worried expression. "I just told my father I won't come back to Los Angeles," she said. Marcus went very still. And he disowned me. Again. "I'm sorry." Maya took the coffee he offered and stepped aside to let him into her apartment. "I'm not." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No?" "No." Maya settled onto her sofa, curling her legs beneath her. "For the first time in my adult life, I told my father the truth about what I wanted instead of what I thought he needed to hear. It was terrifying and liberating, and I have no idea what I'm going to do next, but I'm not sorry. Marcus sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. What do you want to do next? Maya looked around her apartment, at the wildflowers Marcus had left on her first day, now replaced with fresh ones every week. At the books she'd been reading, stacked on the coffee table Emma had picked out. At the man who'd somehow become the best part of her days without either of them quite realizing when it had happened. I want to stay, she said quietly. I want to keep making terrible coffee until I figure out how to make good coffee. I want to wake up in this apartment and fall asleep, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. I want to stop running from my problems and start building solutions. Marcus was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. And I want to see what happens if two broken people stop being afraid of getting hurt and start being curious about getting healed. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge that, once crossed, would change everything. Marcus reached out slowly and touched her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Maya, he said, and her name sounded different in his voice now. Not careful or distant, but intimate. Precious, I know it's complicated, she said quickly. I know I'm your employee and your tenant, and probably not someone you should be. Marcus kissed her. It was soft and careful and absolutely perfect, like he was asking a question she'd been waiting months to answer. Maya melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, all the careful control she'd maintained for so long finally cracking open. When they broke apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. For the record, he said quietly, you stopped being just my employee about 30 seconds after you walked into Grind. And you stopped being just my tenant the night I made you pancakes. Maya smiled, feeling giddy and terrified, and more hopeful than she'd been in months. What am I now? Marcus kissed her again, deeper this time, like he was staking a claim. Mine, he said against her lips. If you want to be. Maya thought about David, who'd never kissed her like she was precious. About her father, who'd never seen her as anything more than a business asset. About all the people who'd expected her to shrink herself to fit their needs. Then she looked at Marcus, who'd given her space to heal and time to choose, and a home where she could be exactly who she was. I want to be, she whispered. Marcus smiled, one of his real smiles that transformed his entire face. And Maya realized that sometimes the scariest choices were also the rightest ones. Good, Marcus said, pulling her closer. Because I have no intention of letting you go. Maya settled into his arms and felt something she'd been missing for months finally click into place. She was home. 2 weeks later, Maya was making what might have been her first truly excellent latte when the coffee shop door chimed. She looked up to see David standing in the entrance, looking wildly out of place in his designer suit among the exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Hello, Maya. Maya's hand stilled on the espresso machine. David, what are you doing here? The merger deadline passed yesterday. His voice was carefully controlled. I thought you should know. And it's over. Both companies are filing. For bankruptcy. Maya felt a stab of guilt, but it was smaller than she'd expected, more manageable. I'm sorry. Are you? Maya considered this. I'm sorry that people are losing their jobs. I'm sorry that you and my father made business decisions that put you in an impossible position. But I'm not sorry that I chose not to fix your problems with my life. David looked around the coffee shop like he was seeing it for the first time. This is what you left me for? This place? I didn't leave you for this place, Maya said calmly. I left you because you were cheating on me with my best friend. This place just happened to be where I landed. Maya, we could still. David. Maya's voice was firm. It's over. It was over the moment I walked into that hotel room and saw you with Serena. This conversation is 6 months too late. David's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. You've changed. Yes, I have. The Maya I knew would never have been so selfish. Maya felt a flicker of the old guilt, the old shame. Then she remembered Marcus's words about martyrs and causes, and the feeling passed. The Maya you knew was performing for an audience that didn't deserve her, she said. This Maya is done with that. David started to respond, but Marcus emerged from the back office, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. Everything okay? Marcus asked, moving to stand beside Maya behind the counter. Maya felt his presence like an anchor, steady and reassuring. David, this is Marcus. Marcus, this is my ex-fiancé. The two men looked at each other with the careful assessment of rivals, though only one of them was still competing. So you're the reason she won't come home, David said. I'm not the reason for anything, Marcus replied evenly. Maya makes her own choices. Right. David's smile was sharp. And what happens when she gets bored with playing coffee shop? When the novelty wears off and she remembers what real life looks like? Maya felt anger flare in her chest. David, you need to leave. Maya, please. Just think about what you're giving up. Your family, your future, my what? Maya stepped around the counter, moving closer to David. My future as your wife? Wondering every day if you were cheating on me again? Living in a house bought with my father's guilt money? Having children with a man I couldn't trust? David flinched. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Maya's voice was clear and strong. David, I hope you figure out whatever issues made you think cheating was acceptable. I hope you find someone who makes you want to be faithful. But that person isn't me, and it never was. David looked at her for a long moment, and Maya saw the exact moment he realized she meant every word. Fine, he said. But don't come crawling back when this fantasy life falls apart. I won't, Maya said simply. David turned and walked out of the coffee shop without another word. Maya stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. She'd faced down her past and chosen her future, and the world hadn't ended. You, okay? Marcus asked softly. Maya turned to look at him, at his concerned eyes and his gentle expression, and the way he was looking at her like she was something precious, and felt a smile spread across her face. I'm perfect, she said. Marcus smiled back and pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of the coffee shop, in front of the handful of customers who were pretending not to watch the drama unfold. I love you, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maya's breath caught. They hadn't said those words yet, had been dancing around them for weeks like they were too fragile to speak aloud. I love you too, Maya said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Marcus kissed her then, deep and claiming and absolutely perfect, and Maya felt the last of her carefully constructed walls finally crumble. She was free. She was home. She was loved. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. 6 months later, Maya stood in the kitchen of Marcus's penthouse apartment, their penthouse apartment now, putting the finishing touches on dinner while Marcus worked at his laptop at the dining room table. He'd moved back to the city 3 months ago, but not back to his old life. Instead, he'd started a consulting firm that specialized in helping family businesses navigate succession planning and financial restructuring, the kind of work that let him use his skills without sacrificing his soul. Maya had come with him, of course. The coffee shop was being run by Zoe now, with Marcus as a silent partner who still showed up most mornings to perfect his latte art and chat with the regulars. How's the Henderson account coming? Maya asked, glancing over at Marcus's. Intense concentration, better than expected. Turns out when you approach business problems as human problems, the solutions become a lot clearer. Maya smiled. Marcus's new approach to work was just one of the ways he'd changed over the past year. He was softer now, more present, quicker, to laugh and slower to anger. Grief counseling had helped, but Maya liked to think their relationship had too. Dinner's almost ready, she said. Marcus closed his laptop and moved into the kitchen, wrapping his arms around Maya's waist from behind. "Smells amazing," he murmured against her neck. "It's just pasta. It's perfect." They ate dinner on the terrace, overlooking the city, talking about Marcus's work and Maya's newest project, a nonprofit that helped women leaving difficult situations find job training and housing. It had started as volunteer work, but was quickly becoming a full-time passion. "I have something for you," Marcus said as they were finishing dessert. Maya looked up from her wine glass. "It's not my birthday." "It's not that kind of gift." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maya's heart stopped. "Marcus?" "Before you panic," Marcus said quickly, "it's not what you think. I mean, it is what you think, but not... Just let me explain." Maya stared at the box like it might bite her. "Okay." Marcus opened it to reveal a ring that was nothing like the enormous diamond David had given her. This was simple, elegant. A single stone in an antique setting that looked like it had its own story to tell. "This was Emma's grandmother's ring," Marcus said softly. "Emma used to play with it when she was little, said she was going to wear it when she got married someday." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Marcus." "I'm not asking you to marry me," Marcus said quickly. "Not yet. I know you need time, and I know marriage is complicated for you after everything that happened with David." "Then what are you asking?" Marcus took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I'm asking if you'll wear this ring as a promise. A promise that someday, when you're ready, when the idea of marriage feels like joy instead of obligation, you'll consider making this official." Maya looked at the ring, then at Marcus, then at the life they'd built together over the past year. It wasn't perfect. They both still had bad days, moments when the past crept in and made the present feel fragile. But it was real. It was chosen. It was theirs. "What if I'm never ready?" Maya asked. "Then we'll be together without the ring." "The piece of paper doesn't matter to me, Maya. You do." Maya felt her heart swell with something that was bigger than love, deeper than affection. It was recognition. The bone-deep certainty that this man, this life, this moment, was what she'd been searching for without knowing it. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Yes. I'll wear your ring. Yes. I'll think about marriage when I'm ready. Yes. I'll build a life with you that's nothing like the life I thought I wanted." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. "I love you, Maya Patterson," Marcus said, bringing her hand to his lips. "I love you too, Marcus Stone." They sat on the terrace as the sun set over the city, two people who'd lost everything and found each other in the ruins. It wasn't the fairy tale Maya had once imagined for herself. It was better. It was real. 1 year later, Maya stood in the back room of a small church in Portland, adjusting the simple white dress she'd chosen for her second wedding. It was nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn to marry David. This one was softer, more her, chosen because she loved it rather than because it photographed well. Zoe knocked on the door and peeked her head in. "You ready?" Maya looked at herself in the mirror, at the ring that had spent a year on her finger, at the dress that made her feel beautiful instead of performed, at the smile that was entirely her own.